I'm sorry, Marcus, Evelyn finally said, her voice trembling. I never wanted to hurt you. I felt so alone while you were away, Anne. I made a mistake. But please, don't let this destroy us. Marcus turned to her, his expression unreadable. You've put me in an impossible position, Evelyn. This isn't just about us. It's about my career, my reputation, everything I've worked for. Once upon a time in the sunny morning in Abuja, the mansion of General Marcus, a respected army officer, stood tall and proud, its white walls shining in the sunlight. Inside the grand dining room, General Marcus and his elegant wife, Evelyn, were having breakfast. Evelyn looked worried, glancing at her phone every few minutes. The general, oblivious, sipped his tea with military precision. What's troubling you, Evelyn? He finally asked, breaking the silence. Evelyn hesitated, then smiled weakly. Oh, it's nothing, Marcus. Just tired. But her eyes said otherwise. Later that day, Evelyn left the mansion in her sleek black car. She had an appointment at a private clinic in the heart of Abuja. She nervously tapped her fingers on the steering wheel, her mind racing. How could this happen, she thought to herself. At the clinic, the doctor confirmed what she already suspected, she was pregnant. But there was one problem, General Marcus had been away on military duty for the past 6 months. Evelyn left the clinic with her hands trembling. Back in the city, Evelyn's close friend, Angela, came to visit. Evelyn confided in her, unable to hold back her tears. Angela, I don't know what to do. I'm pregnant, and it's not Marcus's child. Angela gasped, her eyes widening. Angela was loyal but couldn't help whispering to her husband, who worked at the local radio station. By the next morning, the city was buzzing with the scandal. The general's wife is pregnant became the talk of Abuja. General Marcus returned home unannounced. He stepped out of his car, his boots clicking against the tiled driveway. Evelyn ran to greet him, but her face betrayed her anxiety. Evelyn, what's going on? He asked sternly. She froze, unsure how to respond. Meanwhile, their neighbors peeked through their curtains, eager to see the drama unfold. Did he hear the rumors? They whispered among themselves. Inside the mansion, the tension was thick. Evelyn, I've been hearing things, the general began. Evelyn's heart raced. What have you heard? She stammered, trying to stay calm. Before Marcus could reply, their housemaid, Ada, interrupted. Madam, there's someone at the gate, she said, her voice shaking. Evelyn glanced out the window and gasped. It was Dr. Ikena, the man who had been her secret companion during Marcus's absence. Dr. Ikena looked composed but nervous as he stood at the gate. The security guard eyed him suspiciously. I need to see Madam Evelyn, he said firmly. The general, now curious, decided to handle the situation himself. He walked out to the gate, his military boots echoing on the pavement. Who are you, and why are you here? Marcus asked, his voice cold. Ikena hesitated, then said, I have something important to discuss with your wife. General Marcus stared at Dr. Ikena, his piercing gaze demanding an answer. Evelyn, watching from the window, felt her knees go weak. She wanted to rush out and stop whatever was about to happen, but her feet were glued to the ground. Dr. Ikena took a deep breath. Sir, this is not an easy thing to say. I came because I feel responsible. Evelyn came to me when she needed a friend. I didn't mean for things to go this far. The general's jaw tightened. Are you saying you're the father of my wife's unborn child? He barked, his voice echoing in the still night. Evelyn bolted out the door, tears streaming down her face. Marcus, please, let me explain, she cried, throwing herself between the two men. General Marcus's face turned crimson as he struggled to control his temper. Evelyn, do you know what you've done? This is a betrayal not just to me but to my honor. His voice cracked with raw emotion, and for the first time, Evelyn saw her husband as more than just a stern general, he was a broken man. Dr. Ikenna stepped forward, raising his hands in surrender. General, I take full responsibility for what happened. Please don't blame Evelyn entirely. She needed support, and I was there. Marcus's hands balled into fists. You think that makes it right? Do you understand what this means for my reputation? He roared. Evelyn fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Meanwhile, the drama at the mansion didn't go unnoticed. Neighbors gathered in small groups, whispering and speculating. Did you see the general shouting? I heard it's a doctor who got Evelyn pregnant. By morning, the scandal had spread across Abuja like wildfire. Social media buzzed with posts, memes, and voice notes. The general's wife has a love child, one tweet read. The news even reached some of Marcus's superiors in the army, adding fuel to the fire. The next morning, Evelyn sat in the living room, her eyes swollen from crying. Marcus stood by the window, staring out in silence. The air between them was heavy with unspoken words. I'm sorry, Marcus, Evelyn finally said, her voice trembling. I never wanted to hurt you. I felt so alone while you were away, Anne. I made a mistake. But please, don't let this destroy us. Marcus turned to her, his expression unreadable. You've put me in an impossible position, Evelyn. This isn't just about us. It's about my career, my reputation, everything I've worked for. After a long silence, Marcus finally spoke. There's only one way to fix this, Evelyn. You must tell me the truth, completely and honestly. Who else knows about this? Who else have you told? Evelyn hesitated. Only Angela, she admitted softly. Marcus clenched his jaw. Then we'll need to control this story before it ruins us. I'll speak to Angela myself. He paused, his voice hardening. And as for Dr. Ikenna, he won't escape the consequences of his actions. Evelyn's heart sank. She knew the general's methods were anything but gentle. General Marcus wasted no time. He called Angela to the mansion under the guise of a casual visit. Angela arrived, unsuspecting, her vibrant Ankara dress swaying as she entered the living room. Angela, Marcus began, his tone sharp. Evelyn tells me you're the only one who knows her secret. Angela stiffened. Her eyes darted toward Evelyn, who sat quietly, her hands clasped nervously. Yes, General, Angela replied cautiously. Then how has this story spread across Abuja like wildfire? Marcus demanded. You're her friend. Did you betray her? Angela's face flashed. I didn't mean to, sir, she stammered. I only told my husband, and he must have mentioned it to someone at the station. Evelyn gasped, and Marcus's expression darkened. Do you realize what you've done? He thundered. Angela's lip quivered, and she looked down, unable to meet his gaze. Meanwhile, Dr. Ikenna was back at his clinic, pacing his office. His colleagues had begun to whisper about the scandal, and his patients were cancelling appointments. His phone buzzed, a message from Evelyn. Marcus is furious. I don't know what he's planning. Please be careful. Ikenna sighed heavily. He knew facing Marcus again could be dangerous, but he also felt the weight of his actions. He sat down and began typing a letter of apology to Marcus, hoping it might diffuse the tension. But deep down, he knew words might not be enough. That night, Marcus sat in his study, a single lamp illuminating the room. He reviewed his options carefully. He could file for divorce, but that would make the scandal public and tarnish his reputation further. Alternatively, he could confront Dr. Ikenna directly, but that risked more trouble. He made a call to his trusted aide, Captain Tand. I need you to discreetly gather information on a man named Dr. Ikena, he ordered. I want to know everything about him. Tand replied promptly, yes, sir. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold. If he thinks he can ruin my life, he's mistaken. The next day, Evelyn met Dr. Ikena in secret at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Abuja. Her hands trembled as she held her cup of tea. Ikena, I need to know, are you ready to face Marcus? He won't stop until he gets his revenge, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ikena sighed. Evelyn, I'll take responsibility, but I need you to be honest with me. Do you want this child? And do you want me to be part of your life, despite the chaos it will bring? Evelyn hesitated, tears filling her eyes. I don't know. I'm scared, Ikena. I don't want to lose everything. They sat in silence, the weight of their decisions pressing down on them like a heavy cloud. Captain Tand returned with a file of information on Dr. Ikena. Marcus read through it methodically, his face a mask of focus. Ikena isn't spotless, Tand said cautiously. There's some financial trouble, a few questionable relationships. Nothing criminal, but enough to tarnish his reputation. Marcus smirked. Good. If he wants to play games, I'll show him who's in charge. Draft a letter for him. He'll understand what happens when you cross an army general. Tand nodded and left the room. Marcus stared at the file, his mind already strategizing his next move. The following morning, her courier delivered an envelope to Dr. Ikena's clinic. It bore the general's official seal, its weight hinting at the significance of its contents. Ikena opened it with trembling hands. The letter was brief but chilling. Asterisk, Dr. Ikena. You have disrespected me, my family, and my name. You have two options, leave Abuja immediately and never return, or face the consequences of your actions. Consider this your only warning. General Marcus. Asterisk. Ikena sat back in his chair, his heart pounding. He had expected anger, but not a threat of this magnitude. He folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope, his mind racing. What do I do now? He whispered to himself. That evening, Evelyn stormed into Marcus's study. What did you do, Marcus? She demanded, her voice shaking with both fear and anger. Marcus didn't look up from the papers on his desk. I'm handling the situation, Evelyn. Something you clearly failed to do. You threatened Ikena, didn't you? She accused, slamming her hands on the desk. This isn't just about him. It's about our child, my child. You can't control everything like it's a battlefield. Marcus stood slowly, his towering presence intimidating but calm. You brought this into our lives, Evelyn. I'm cleaning up the mess. If you want to save him, you'd better tell him to listen to me. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. You're turning into a man I don't recognize, she said quietly before walking out of the room. Dr. Ikena paced his small apartment, the letter lying open on his coffee table. He couldn't sleep, his mind was consumed with fear and uncertainty. His phone buzzed, it was Evelyn. Ikena, Marcus isn't bluffing. You need to leave Abuja, she said, her voice trembling. Ikena shook his head, even though she couldn't see him. I can't just run away, Evelyn. If I do, he'll think he's won. And what about you? What about the child? Evelyn hesitated before replying, I'll handle Marcus, but you need to be safe. Please, Ikena, just go. Ikena sighed. I'll think about it, he said, though his heart told him he couldn't abandon her. Marcus wasn't done. He had another meeting with Captain Tand, this time with a more aggressive plan. Ikena hasn't responded to the letter yet, Tand reported. Marcus smirked darkly. Then we escalate. Leak the details of his financial troubles to the press. Make sure it looks legitimate. And keep an eye on him, I want to know every move he makes. Tand hesitated for a moment. Sir, are you sure this won't backfire? Marcus's eyes hardened. He crossed me, Tand. In my world, there are no second chances. Evelyn sat alone in the garden, the moonlight reflecting off the pond. She thought about the life she'd built with Marcus and how it was unraveling before her eyes. She placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the tiny life growing inside her. What kind of world am I bringing you into? She whispered. For the first time, she considered a drastic option, leaving Abuja herself. But could she abandon everything, knowing Marcus would stop at nothing to find her? Her thoughts were interrupted by a call from Angela. Evelyn, you need to see this, Angela said, her voice urgent. Evelyn opened her social media to find news articles about Ikena's financial troubles flooding her feed. Her heart sank. Marcus's plan was already in motion. The morning after the financial scandal broke, Dr. Ikena's clinic was swarmed by reporters and curious onlookers. Cameras flashed, and microphones were shoved in his face as he stepped out of his car.